Coogs House. We're almost to basketball season. And what you got to do to get first place these days?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougars Daily Podcast, held by your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. I appreciate making Locked On Cougs your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. If you want to join the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below what the last book you read is. That's the question of the day. Who's doing a book club that came out earlier today? First episode's out. Book club about Dream, the life and legacy of Juwan. That's also in your feeds. Now, with that being said, obviously, this is the more traditional episode. We're doing a book club every Monday. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. It's going to feel much more normal. And now we're talking about Houston Cougar Basketball. Now, I want to talk about the commitment over the weekend of Bryce Jackson and how excited that is and why there's room to be really excited about that one. I want to talk about who made what team in the all-conference preseason selection. But first and foremost, Houston got second in place. In the preseason coaches poll, Big 12 coaches poll, we're doing this thing again, apparently, where the Houston Cougars get second place to the Kansas Jayhawks as people don't learn their lesson. Now, it was a close margin. I don't mean to say that it was like some gargantuan flip or something. But it went Houston second with Kansas first, Iowa State third, Baylor fourth, and Arizona fifth. Last year, it was Kansas first, Houston second, Texas third, and Baylor fourth. So, again, we're doing this whole thing all over again. Kansas did have a bunch of transfers in, and I get some of the excitement, I guess, around that. Hunter Dickinson, again, preseason conference player of the year. We saw how well that went for them last year. It feels like rinse repeat. And I think that's the starting thing about this. It's not that I care, you care, or even Kelvin Sampson, anybody actually cares a whole lot about preseason rankings. I don't mean to say that they're like some end-all, be-all kind of thing. It's just odd to me that we're doing this all over again. Houston returned more starters from last year's team to this year than they did either of the seasons prior. They returned 4 of last season's 5 starters to this year's team. Last year, they won the conference, returning just 2 of the starters from the year previous. They moved up in conference to do that too. I don't know. I know Jamal Shead leaves a gigantic hole, and I don't mean to beat around the bush with that. I do know that a year ago we were talking about Marcus Sasser, first-round draft pick, leaving a massive hole. We're talking about Jarris Walker, a first-round draft pick, leaving a massive hole. We're talking about Tremont Mark, a transfer out, leaving a big hole. And it didn't seem to matter. Houston trucked on. Now, going into this year, we're talking about Houston losing Jamal Shead. Jamal Shead was Conference Player of the Year, first-team All-American, is now a Toronto Raptor. I get it. I understand that he is incredible. I have and will make the argument that the number one needs to be retired at the University of Houston purely based on how well last year went. Previous years aside, just based on how well last year went, I would retire number one at the University of Houston. However, they're returning the other 4 starters, the majority of the bench. They replaced Jamal Shead with a first-team All-Big 12 freshman 2 years ago and a starter at Oklahoma the last 2 years in Milo Suzanne. I feel like that's pretty strong folks. The kid might be a pro as well. He's 6'4", long arms. He's a more traditional point guard that doesn't do a lot of. I mean, last year the big games they had to get Houston needed Jamal to get 29 or 30, and he'd do that. I don't know that Milos is necessarily going to do that, but like the dude can play, and moreover, you got Cryer in the system for a second year. I'm not alone in this, but I'm projecting a pretty big year and leap out of Emmanuel Sharp at the other wing position. Juwan Roberts is back. Javier Francis is second year as a starter. You're bringing JoJo Tugler back off the bench. He was first team all-conference freshman last year, right? You're also going to be bringing along backups off the bench like Terrence Arsenault is coming back in swing. We know that he's working his way back to full health. He was primed for a big year last year. Ought to have a big one this year. Ramon Walker is back. Top 60 freshman, top 60 high school recruit in the country coming in. Mercy Miller is a freshman. Chase McCarty is a big-time wing prospect coming in from IMG. These guys, I mean, 4-star kid. These guys are a tremendous basketball team, and I don't know that it bothers me that they're not picked first. Maybe a little bit. Okay, maybe a little bit. I don't know why we're doing this again, where it's like, well, Kansas has Hunter Dickinson. Because you knew who Kansas had last year? Hunter Dickinson. And I just don't know. Yes, Houston lost 3 conference games on the road last year. And one of them was in Fog Allen. It's a tough place to play. They lost by double digits in Fog Allen and won the aggregate by 17. Right? That's how bad the beatdown was in Houston to wrap up the regular season. Right? Look, I understand, Lipsey's coming back with Iowa State, and they could really be a tremendous program down there. And frankly, they're probably doing their own podcast on why they're ranked behind Houston, because they beat Houston 2 out of 3 times last year. Right? I get that. Once being in Ames, Iowa, once being in the conference tournament after playing 4 games in 4 days or whatever that was, right? I get their argument too. Baylor pulled in a couple transfers we'll talk about in the second segment, and a big time prospect they seem to have every year, it feels like, the one and done kind of kid, the cup of the day, soup of the day for their one and done prospect that they seem to have there. Kudos. I think it's interesting that this played out so similarly, right? Where we're going to tell ourselves that Houston's not the best team. It's Kansas, and the Kansas is going to have some close loss to someone in November at some big showcase that they get invited to because they do or whatever. And they'll be like, oh, but like that was a good loss. Trust me. Good loss. Houston's going to beat the brakes off of some smaller conference team that you've never heard of. And we're not going to think about them until they make the tournament in March for winning their conference by 20 games or whatever. And it's like, oh man, that team actually ended up being okay. Like those things are just going to happen over and over and over again. And I think that's the part that gets me, is like, this feels so similar to a year ago. And I would argue that, yes, losing Jamal is huge, but Houston returns more between year 1 and 2 in the Big 12 than they did from year 0 to 1. So why are we doing this again? Kansas adds Rylan Griffin, the Stico kid from a small school, and whatever. They added a bunch of kids last year too, and I guess they weren't very deep last year, but this just feels like wash, rinse, repeat, whatever. Now, the individual awards, the preseason awards, all Big 12 teams came out, and they made a little more sense. And I want to talk about them some in the second segment. But before we get to that, I do want to tell you all a little bit about our buddies over at LinkedIn. Because if you are trying to put together your best team, kind of like the Big 12 is all Big 12 team is the best team, when you're trying to find the right hires for a small business, you got to find those quality professionals that are just right for the role. You got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs are the tools you need to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. LinkedIn helps you find and hire professionals you cannot find anywhere else, even those who are not actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like professional on LinkedIn. Post job free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post job free. Terms and conditions apply. Parker Answer here at Locked on Cougs, talking about preseason basketball action. The all-conference teams are out. Houston with LJ Cryer and Juwan Roberts, the only program in the Big 12 with two people on the first team. LJ Cryer and Juwan Roberts both make the first team. The first team's backcourt has also got Caleb Love of Arizona. He was at North Carolina for a hot second, if that name sounds familiar. And then Tamin Lipsey, the guy that was there last year, strong guard there at Iowa State. He's really good. And then the other starting front court player is Hunter Dickinson. Dickinson was a, quote, unanimous selection, apparently. He's really good. I don't mean to say he's not. It's just an interesting... We're doing it over again. We're doing it all over again. Houston's, you'll notice the only team with two people on the first team. Houston had no one on the second team. Kansas did have two people on the two teams, one on the first, one on the second. DeJuan Harris, the guard, made the second team. Iowa State, in the same vein, had Keyshawn Gilbert, their other guard, make the second team. So they had two people get recognized, obviously, with first team and second team combined. Baylor had two second teamers, but are both folks that are transfers into Baylor that were not there last year. Norshad Omier, remember, from the University of Miami. Houston saw him in the Sweet 16 game a couple years ago. And Jeremy Roach from Duke, you remember him from last year's Sweet 16 game. They're both now at Baylor and on the second team preseason. Coleman Hawkins, big-time Kansas State transfer, rounds out that team. So Houston gets a little bit more respect in that instance. And what's interesting to me is, in combining the data from that and the rankings, the preseason standings, it's almost like people said, oh, they have two of the five best players in the conference, but we're not going to think anything about them, right? Like, it is interesting. It also is interesting to me that Houston only had two. I would have thought Emmanuel would have had some votes. He may very well have had some votes and not make a team. They don't have the full voting breakdown here. I would have thought Emmanuel would have had some votes, though, at one of the guard spots. Guards are hard to make in this conference, especially when you add Arizona State. So I will say that I would have thought that. What's worth, Houston did not have any of the preseason individual player of the year was Hunter Dickinson of Kansas. Newcomers was a split vote between Jeremy Roach and Coleman Hawkins. Freshman of the year is VJ Edgecombe. I said the soup of the day, cup of the day kind of person. The one and done of the day at Baylor. They seem to have one of those every year, it feels like, right? And so that rounds out those preseason awards. I do think that it's worth pointing out, last year, Houston actually did worse in this. Last year, Cryer was first team. Houston had no one on the second team. They listed an honorable mention set last year, and Jamal Shed was, quote, honorable mention in the preseason last year, which I think just means he got votes. They didn't list that this year. And so I don't know that Emmanuel would have gotten that or not, but last year, Jamal Shed went from honorable mention to running away with every award he's eligible for in the conference, right? And so I think it's safe to say that these maybe don't matter as much. Again, maybe they don't matter as much, but it is an interesting way to look at the program. Last year, Houston hopped in. LJ Cryer made first team because Big 12 knew him. He was transferring to Houston from Baylor. Big 12 knew him from Baylor. They assume that he's going to get a little bit of the coaching that Houston plugs in. Bang, bang, boom. That's great. Jamal Shed got a few votes. That was it. Houston seems to be getting similar disrespect this year. Not necessarily in this category. Again, they got two guys on the first team. But as a second-year team, right, they won the regular season last year by 2 whole games. To be sitting where they're sitting, right, Now, what's interesting about this is the discrepancy. It looks like this conference looks fairly top heavy, both when you look at individual awards and team awards. The drop off between like Arizona at 5 and Cincinnati at 6 in terms of like points you get. So you get like a lot more points for a first place vote than a second place vote, and so on. Houston and Kansas were separated by just 4 points. Kansas got 215 points. Houston got 211. Iowa State 194, Baylor 185, Arizona 179. Those all are, within 30 points, within 40 points. One of that. That's 5-1 is pretty tight knit, especially when 1 and 2 are that close. Then you have a big jump from 179 down to 140 at Cincinnati at 6. Right, there's a big gap there. I think of Cincinnati Tech, Kansas State, BYU, TCU, UCF, Arizona State, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Colorado, Utah, on down the list. And so I think Cincinnati's going to do better than that. I'll say that. I look at this overall and where Houston fits in, and I do wonder why we're setting up such a rinse repeat performance across the board here. I look at LJ Cryer, and I imagine he's still playing the 2 guard this year. A lot of preseason talk outside of Houston talking about him as in the replacement Jamal Shead point guard role. I don't see that happening at all. He's going to be very much the same kind of guy that he was a year ago. He's going to be off the ball a lot. Milo's going to be on the ball a lot. They may run some 2-point guard kind of sets like they did with Marcus and Jamal a couple years back, but I don't see them doing a whole lot of lead ball handling with Cryer. If anything, I think they'll see more of that with Mercy as we get closer to things where Mercy's getting to play more. If Mercy gets to play more, Mercy is really good, can really score the basketball. It's about how quickly he adapts to the culture. It's hard to play in the culture as a freshman. We've seen guys do, like Jarvis did it before. Obviously, Jarvis was a starter, and Emmanuel Sharp was a first guard off the bench in it before. I'm not saying it can't be done by any stretch. It's just hard. I would imagine Mercy is talented enough to play, though, in the Big 12 when he comes in as a freshman. And so we'll see how he ties into that ball handling role. What's funny is actually there may be more space on the floor for a guy like Chase. Chase McCarty's a wing. He's a 6'6" kind of wing. And truthfully, he may get on the floor faster just because of a spatial thing. His body's pretty developed and those kind of things. But I wonder where he fits into this whole thing as well. JoJo Tugler should be a big role kind of guy this year. He's the first guy off the bench by every stretch. And then Terrence will work on his way there. It looked like earlier this month, I should say, we saw reports come out that Terrence is still working his way back. It's not that he's not going to be 100% at some point this season. He's just not there as of October 1st or whatever, right? And so, like, as you're getting into this exhibition game at the end of the month and getting into games starting in November and stuff like that, if he's still not quite back, the ACL is a 1-year injury. It typically, it's been sped up a little bit. Adrian Peterson sped it up from everybody, right? But I would point out that it is typically a 1-year injury. He got injured last December, so 1 year would be this December. And so that he's on the floor at all is probably a little ahead of schedule. But anyway, I just these preseason things get me excited because it means Houston Cougar basketball is coming back. It gets me perturbed, we'll say, because it feels like we're kind of back where we were a year ago. People are like, I don't know about this Houston team. What are they going to do to replace so-and-so? And it's like we've done this replacing guys thing for like 4 years in a row now, and it's been fine. Every single time, Houston's been fine. And I'm sure we'll be fine again. Now, future replacements would mean current recruits. And we know Isaiah Harwell's coming in as a big-time number 1 shooting guard in class 2025 prospect. But Houston got another big-time prospect over the weekend in a little bit different kind of way. So I want to go and talk about him in a second. But first, got to tell you a little bit about Game Time. If you want to go check out the Game Time app, use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. They have all kinds of cool last minute zone deals. You can get all in pricing, so you get no surprises. I like the seat view, exactly for concerts or theater or comedy shows or whatever you're going to, sports games as well, what the view looks like in that venue, in that section, in that row for that type of event. And that's really, really important. The last minute lowest price guarantee means you can get 110% of the difference credited back to you if you can find the same section and row for cheaper somewhere else. So Game Time is the place to take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Turn to play again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's Game Time. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Cougs here to talk about the latest commitment to the Houston Cougars. That is one Bryce Jackson of Shadow Creek High School. Bryce is a, present tense 3-star commitment. And I say present tense because he had an interesting high school career. He was a really highly touted guy going into a sophomore year. He plays in the Houston Hoops AAU circuit program, one of the higher end Nike programs in the country. It's one of the 2 big Nike programs in the city of Houston. They and JL3 are kind of the 2 top tier guys in the Nike circuit, the EYBL. And played at Shadow Creek High School, but major injuries kind of derailed his sophomore and junior seasons. Looks like ankle injuries, lower leg injuries, and things like that. And so there's not a whole lot of film on the kid. And he's still a 3-star prospect, listed at 6'6" on some places, 6'5" on others. Pretty sturdy build, listed everywhere between 180 and 195. I'd probably put him closer to 190 at the eyesight. And I've watched what I could find on the kid to get ready for this today. I will stress, though, that because of those injuries and missing so much of his high school seasons, there's a lot less out there. He had a pretty big 2024 summer, and I would stress that basically that summer alone has him at a 3-star prospect, right? And so without a whole lot of background, I would stress that that's unique, right? And this is the second summer in a row we've seen Houston do something like this, and I'll talk about that at the end. But what Bryce brings to the table is a couple things. One, the kid can flat shoot it. And at first, that makes sense. You think about a guy that's been hurt. What can you do when you're hurt? You can get to the gym and get shots up, right? The kid can flat shoot. He shoots off the move. He shoots off the bounce. Really, really impressed with his EYBL film of hitting shots. They pop him out from the high post area. Again, he's 6'6", long arms. He pops out and shoots deep shots. I'd call him more of a small forward. His position on the recruit website says wing, and he shoots the ball well to be out there. I don't know that he's a ball handler guard type necessarily. He just hadn't shown it. And again, there's limited film on him out there. The way I think he fits into Houston, though, aside from just hitting jump shots, is the kid likes defending. He's even, I think it's easy to think of guys that have been hurt a lot in their high school careers. Like, it would be natural to be a little bit more timid, especially on those big stages, big bodies. You don't get hurt a third time in 3 years. And he's throwing his body around, getting in front of guys with the basketball, playing defense for 94 feet. Really is a pretty active guy. It certainly doesn't let that injury history keep him from attacking the rim either. Those kinds of things, I think, speak to a mentality of a guy that's got a lot of toughness to him. Because, again, it'd be easy if you've tweaked your ankle or messed up your ankle or injured your ankle that badly, that many times in that short a window, it would be very natural to not throw your body on the line there like that. And he's very much been, I don't mean to say like recklessly so, but certainly not intimidated by it. I think that toughness ties in the culture we see at Houston. I also appreciate, people talk about expanding rosters in college basketball, expanding scholarship positions and stuff like that. He's a top-end product out of the city of Houston, right? Has he had some bad injury luck? Yes. Bluntly, his father played at Syracuse. He's got some genetic help there too. But Houston is saying, hey, this kid's got a chance to be one of the special stories out of the city. Let's bring him on in. Again, he's a 3-star product that didn't play a whole lot of basketball till this past summer, as far as like stuff that'd get him on recruit sites and on the big boards and stuff like that. And it feels a lot like, this is where I said I'd tie in earlier, Jacob McFarland a year ago. Jacob had a gigantic summer going into a senior year of high school. And he's a 7-foot beanpole, but had a really strong AAU summer and shot up recruit boards. Right now, he didn't have the injury history, so he went from like a 2-star to a 4-star like that. Right. Bryce is kind of going from an unknown 0-star to a 3-star, the same kind of jump. And again, they got him McFarland. He spent a year working on his body. He's put on a lot of good weight in there with Alan Bishop. And he's set to be a big part of this year's team and program. And moving forward, he'll be a big part of Houston Cougar basketball, right? I feel kind of like this Bryce Jackson commitment feels similar. He's, kind of coming out of nowhere in a lot of people's national searches. And admittedly, I had to call and text some people, be like, hey, what can you tell me about this kid? It helps to know a handful of people, right? But like, who is this guy? I hadn't seen him play at Shadow Creek. Well, he hadn't played a whole lot of Shadow Creek because of injuries. Well, where's he played? Houston Hoops. Okay, making a different phone call. What can you tell me? And so we get to see these guys grow in the program in a way that, like, it feels like you're finding more diamonds in the rough. And while Houston signs the Isaiah Harwells, the top shooting guard in the country, right? And they've got a really good shot at signing Kingston Fleming, the top point guard, top player in Texas, top point guard in the country, and top player in Texas, right? And they may get John Clark, a top power forward, top forward in Texas. And they may really start bringing in a bunch of these guys. And I think they've really got a real shot at each of those guys. It also helps to get these diamonds in the rough and get them right. And I appreciate that they go get these guys with a lot less tape out there from Houston, because if you're going to be a program that is hashtag for the city, you can't do it without the kids from Houston, right? And so it's an interesting look. Now, again, John Clark's also from Houston. I know that. And Kingston's from Brennan High School in San Antonio, which is not horribly far away. I get that, right? But, and Chris Sinak, I guess, is from not so far away either. They got a bunch of feelers out and a bunch of high-end recruits. But when you're going to extend these kind of like, hey, we know you've had some bad luck, but here's a chance because I think you got something there. Extending those two kids from Houston that, again, when you watch him play, he looks like a Cougar on the floor. It's really, really important to me, and I'm glad they pulled this one off. Again, I didn't know a whole lot about him before the commitment. Sounds like Houston was his first big offer. He took it right away. But everyone I talked to about it, and I talked to a couple. I'm not going to say I talked to 25, 30 people. I talked to a couple people. They all are very quick to be like, that's a good one. Trust me, that'll work out, right? And so we'll see. Sampson and company know a lot more about this than I do. They always tend to get these kind of things right. For what it's worth, same high school Ramon Walker came from. He worked out pretty well too. We're going to be bringing down each thing. We'll be bringing on more things each and every day here. Houston plays Kansas back in football this weekend. Another chance for a week. We're going to go on a little winning streak here. We'll talk more about that this week. Locked On Cougs bringing it here each and every day. Locked On Cougs is proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. Means your team every day. Go Cougs.